I am Dr. Toku Takahashi. After specializing in gastrointestinal surgery in Japan for 10 years, I moved to the United States. I worked for a total of more than 20 years at the University of Michigan, Duke University, and the Medical College of Wisconsin. About 10 years ago, I returned to Japan, and I am currently running an integrative medicine clinic in Nagoya for. Previously, I spoke about love and health. This is now the 7th talk in that series. Are humans fundamentally good or fundamentally evil? This question has been debated by philosophers since ancient times. The surprising answer revealed by neuroscience. The Chinese thinker Mencius proposed the theory of the innate goodness of human nature. He believed that humans are born with a heart inclined toward goodness. In contrast, Zunzi argued that human nature is inherently selfish and that people must be guided toward goodness through education. In fact, modern neuroscience is now shedding new light on this ancient debate. The key lies in a hormone in the brain, oxytocin. In the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, there is a famous story, the story of Cain and Abel. Abel was a shepherd and Cain was a farmer. One day, when the two were alone in a field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. God asked Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain answered, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" This story symbolizes the jealousy, anger, and violence that exist within human beings. It seems to ask the very question, are humans inherently evil? However, neuroscience shows that the human brain also contains a completely opposite system. Within the human brain are two hormones with very similar structures, oxytocin and vasopressin. Both are peptide hormones produced in the hypothalamus, yet their functions are strikingly different. Oxytocin is associated with trust, love, empathy, social bonding, and protecting members of one's group. It can be considered a hormone that promotes altruistic behavior. On the other hand, vasopressin is associated with anxiety, fear, aggression, territorial behavior, and strengthens self-defensive responses. Thus, the human brain contains both a circuit of love and a circuit of fear. Human beings cannot survive without their mothers. A newborn human baby is almost completely helpless. Nutrition depends on the mother's breastfeeding, and even the maintenance of body temperature depends on the warmth of the mother. But what happens if contact with the mother is lost? To investigate this question, scientists conducted an animal experiment. Newborn rats were separated from their mothers for 3 hours a day for 14 days. This is known as the maternal separation experiment. The result was striking. In the brains of the rats, when they grew up, oxytocin-producing cells were greatly reduced. Furthermore, these rats showed reduced sociability, increased anxiety, and increased aggression. In other words, the following chain occurred. Maternal separation leads to reduced oxytocin, which leads to an increase in selfish behavior. If we express these findings simply, it looks like this. In a state resembling the theory of innate goodness, oxytocin becomes dominant, and love, empathy, and trust becomes stronger. In a state resembling the theory of innate evil, vasopressin becomes dominant, and fear and aggression increase. In other words, human nature may not be fixed. It may change depending on the environment. Children who grow up receiving sufficient affection from their mothers tend to show a well-developed oxytocin system and rich social behavior, high empathy. Even more interestingly, when these children become parents themselves, they tend to raise their own children with similar affection. In other words, love is passed down across generations. But there is also a tragic historical example. It occurred under the Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. As part of a population increase policy, he enforced a ban on abortion, a ban on divorce, encouragement of large families. However, due to economic collapse and policy failures, many families could no longer raise their children. As a result, more than 65,000 children were placed in orphanages. Many of them were infants less than 1 month old. In these orphanages, children were sometimes left unattended for more than 20 hours a day. Later, when researchers followed up on children who had been adopted overseas, they found high rates of intellectual disability, lack of sociability, autism-like symptoms. Furthermore, studies confirmed that these children had extremely low levels of oxytocin in their urine. In other words, the following chain occurred. Lack of affection leads to low oxytocin, leads to social impairment. The conclusion that emerges from this is extremely important. Human beings are not inherently good and not inherently evil. Within our brains exist both the system of love, oxytocin, and the system of fear, vasopressin. Which system becomes stronger depends greatly on the environment in which we grow, and our relationships with others. Robo. Inside the human brain, there exists a circuit of peace. If a child is embraced, spoken to, raised with affection, then in that child's brain develops the circuitry that produces trust, empathy, cooperation. In other words, the human brain already contains a neural system capable of creating peace. World peace is not only a matter of nations or politics. Perhaps it begins with the relationship between one mother and one child.